Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Poppy Hour, our monthly Zoom conversation about California native plants. My name is Erin Johnson, and I'm the outreach manager at Theodore Payne Foundation for Wildflowers and Native Plants. And we are a nonprofit organization that is dedicated to the understanding and preservation of California native plants. Please come visit us. We are located out in Sun Valley. We are 22 acres in a canyon, and we propagate California native plants. We have a retail nursery as well as demonstration gardens. And today, we are going to be taking a deep dive into the topic of wildfire. And for any of you who are new to LA or California, it might be sort of confusing, this connection between wildfire and California native plants, but fire has been part of our landscape here for millions of years. And while we often think of it as simply a destructive force, it actually contributes, it's an essential part of our ecology, and it contributes to the rich biodiversity that we have here, as well as many, many other ecosystem benefits. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're very, very honored to have a special guest who's going to be talking about cultural burns. And so before we get into it, we just want to give a shout out. This season of Poppy Hour was made possible by an anonymous donor who we are very grateful to. And this episode is supported by Edison International. And we're also, this talk tonight is connected to a series of wildfire awareness programs that we're offering. We have 2 free classes on Saturday as well. So we hope you'll join us for that. And I'll drop that link in the chat. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my co-host, Brenda Kyle. Hey, Brenda.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Darren, for that. This is the beginning of what is today, June 24th. June 24th for a lot of the world marks the start of monsoon season, but not here. Not in this very special place that we call LA, with our very special climate that only exists in 2% of the world. In the 2% of the world, it's pretty much fire season. Goodness gracious. So the classes tomorrow are on Zoom, right? So anyone can join, and they are free. Thank you for that. And again, thank you to the anonymous donor. We'll start with our land acknowledgement. The Theodore Payne Foundation, the beautiful 22 acres that we have in our nonprofit nursery, sit on Tataviam land. So we'd like to honor the Tataviam Fernandino people and all our neighbors in all directions, the Serrano, the Kitanamuk, the Luiseño. So thank you for all of those cultures and their valuable traditional ecological knowledge. And we'll start with Flora next from our nursery, and she has 2 very special plant. So Flora, what did you bring with us? What did you bring to us today?
So from the sales yard at the Theodore Payne Foundation, I brought, as Brenda mentioned, 2 plants, and very, very special. One is the Juncus textilis, and I'm going to actually start it from its base and bring it down, because this thing is super, super tall right out of its container. And the Juncus textilis, or the basket rush, is local to our area. And it was used by the Native Americans in making baskets. So thus it's a common name here. But one of the things that really impressed me, and I hope I can get a good shot of this, and excuse me if I don't, then that means you're all going to have to come and see it in person. But it's really the flower. And this is one reason why I picked this one here. And you can see how there's a bunch of flowers up at the top. People will often wonder about its beauty, and it's known for its cylindrical form. And they were actually wonderful. The way that they form and their length really help with the basket base. I have actually a personal connection to the Juncus because my background is in textiles. And when I came to Theodore Payne and realized that this was one for the baskets that the Native American used, I just also want to point out that you can find this grown just above our south parking lot between a Quercus agrifolia, an oak, and a sycamore, and it's doing wonderfully and can also be planted or potted up during the summertime here. And then that leads me to the Quercus agrifolia, which is really, I think, going to be the highlight of today's talk. And the Quercus agrifolia is the coast live oak, local to our area. And if anything, as we were talking, just to see where crocuses are planted, especially in our landscape at TPF, if you come into the sales yard, we actually have two very old ones that bookend the sales yard on either side of the west or the east, something to see. And then we do have one up towards the front near the juncus that I had mentioned, and all of them are doing really well. One of the things that makes them very drought resistant is that they are evergreen leaves. And because they're evergreen, they're able to push their energies into different places at different times based on heat and based on fire. I also understand that they are deep root growers. They have a deep tap root, but they also do a lateral root growing too as well. But yeah, so I want to mention that the juncus is available in the sales yard, and we would love for you guys to come out. And this is just actually a specimen that I got from production. So we are working on a whole inventory of this now. Alrighty?
Oh, thank you very much, Flora. This is, oh goodness, we're really excited to have Richard Bugbee. His background is ethnobotany. Richard, tell us a little bit about yourself, and thank you for joining us today.
Oh, okay. Miyom, Lovikup, Notung Ipak Wishmak Yaka Atachi, Notung Ipak Richard Bugbee, known Payoomkawish. My name's Richard Bugbee, and I'm Payoomkawish is kind of Luiseño, Juaneño. I grew up in Kumeyaay territory in a place called Old Town San Diego, which was the village of Kosa'aay. I ended up with my teacher, and I ended up, and we were together for like 35 years with her teaching me. I actually kind of listened to her talk for about 2 years before she even talked to me. And the reason she picked me to teach is because I never came up and asked her any questions, and she always saw me there. So anyway, most of my knowledge comes from my teacher, Jane Dumas, and my grandfather, John Peters. Anyway, John Peters was my grandfather. He was Luiseño from Paula, and he's the one that taught me shelters and hunting and that type of stuff. While Jane taught me more medicinal plants and food plants and things like that. So what happened was I would work with Jane, and she'd talk about plants, but she'd only know the Kumeyaay words and things like that for them. And so what I do is I went to school and started taking botany courses. So I can say, when she's talking about Pithai, I can say, oh, that's Salvia apiana. And then I found out there's a plant called the sook, and that used to be Scirpus, and it's Sonoplectus now. And then I found out these scientific names, they change all the time. So the names that stayed the same were the original tribal names. The only difficult part is as you travel up the coast. I lived in Topanga Canyon for 25 years and taught down here in San Diego. And so I actually traveled to, a few tribes' territories, and I would name the plants as I go through, but it'd be the same plant, but it'd have a different name. So it's not too difficult to know the same plant and a different name. Oh, they call it.
Just takes practice, right? And a
Yeah,
willingness to learn. Right. So, Mr. Bugbee, we're ready to learn all about fire whenever you are.
Okay. I gotta pull this up.
So while we're waiting for the presentation to come up, as a reminder, if at any time anyone has questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We will be monitoring, or to put them in the Q&A, and we'll get to them at the end of the program. We did allow time.
I think you need to be able to share my screen. Can I?
Yeah, you should be able to.
Let's try it. Yeah, one more time.
Can you see me? Can you see me?
We can see you, but not your screen, not yet.
Huh. Oh, here it is.
Technology.
Yeah. Bam. Okay. So I'm going to start out in my tribal language is Chantala. Chantala is the language from the Luiseño or the Payoomkawish people. Japena is a word for a fire lit in a circle at several places that burns to the center. Here I have Ute Lovik, and Ute is fire. Lovik means that it's good. Upamudlikala is a term for a wildfire. We had, and it actually means a fire that burns itself. And these happen to us too, but they would only go so far because of the way we reduce fuels from our cultural burns that we always did. But we need to use these reductions of fuels from our wildfires we're having right now, and start facilitating cyclical mosaic burns or cultural burns. Wildfires are devastating while the cultural burns are revitalizing. And so we can kind of bring back there's kind of two different fires. There's one that's, you look at it, it's all black, that's a good fire. And you look at the other one that's all white from the ash, that's a fire that's too hot. So the land with its plants and animals had a reciprocal relationship with the indigenous people for tens of thousands of years. And for the last 500 years, the plants, animals, and the land have felt abandoned and don't know what to do. We are losing our grasslands and meadows to chaparral plant communities. And we lost a lot of wetlands and coastlands to development. That's actually the first lands we lost. And a lot of people want to call this land management, but I like to call it relationships with the land. This is across the street where I used to live in Topanga. One of the first things I did when I moved up to Topanga is wanted to know what Topanga meant. And so I asked all my elders and stuff, and no one knew. And then I got a hold of Pablo Toc's writings, and the second word in his writings was Tupanga, which meant to be in heaven. But it means to be up high, close to the Creator. So it's kind of a special place. So this is my first lesson I learned from my teacher, and this used to say gathering with respect, but this is the same thing. If you were going to do a cultural fire, you would do the same process. You always offer a prayer, ask permission and give your intention, because and you know, I'll tell you what you're going to do and why, so that the everything's good. Anyway, this is the process we go through. I remember my grandfather used to hunt deer this way, and he had the best tasting deer too. I always got he not only would hunt the deer, he would tan the hide, and he'd always give us, I wish I still had them, a pair of chaps and a vest, you know, the deer skin. And I always got the bullet hole, so it's kind of, anyway. So this is Ishi. He was the last Yahi Indian. He lived over in UC Berkeley and hung out in Golden Gate Park, and I don't know if they had that bridge then. I don't know. Anyway, fire was the most significant, effective, and widely employed vegetation management tool of California Indian tribes. It was used all the time. So there's cultural burns versus control burns. Control burns target acreage for fire breaks, treats plants as objects and fuel, and there's fewer control burns, but they burn larger plots. With cultural burns, it targets the health of plant and animal communities. If plants are overgrown, and they tend to do that down here because of the we kind of they overgrow and we burn them back, and it's for tens of thousands of years. That's the way it's happened, and for the last 500 years it hasn't happened mainly because it stopped when cattle came here, because the ranchers saw us burning the grasslands, thought we were taking the burning their cattle's food, when actually we were producing more because they were fire dependent. Anyway, so cultural burns causes small fire breaks. It treats plants as living beings. You want to burn so you can get the best medicine and the best food. And with cultural burns, there's more of them, but they're smaller. They're smaller plots, so that you're breaking up this continuous. And there's something to burn. We'll get to that. So this is a graph by Don Hankins. Don Hankins is a pyrogeographer. Is it Cal State Chico? Something State Chico. Anyway, he's a PhD. Anyway, this is his graph of wildfire versus indigenous fires, and with the wildfires, it benefits few species, emits greenhouse gases, and the loss of livelihood, loss of property, trauma, everything's not very good. And with indigenous fires, there's black carbon, there's a toxin filtration with a charcoal. There's one of the byproducts of indigenous fires is that it raises the water table. The plants that come back retain water in their roots instead of sucking up water. Also, it benefits many species, and we get a better plants and a better product for what we're going to use it for. You get longer, straighter shoots. So the indigenous land management or relationships, there's burning, irrigating, pruning, coppicing, sowing, tilling, transplanting, and transplant usually like willow is like really easy. And the benefits are game management, insect gathering, insect control. Every time I read that, I think of the cricket tacos we had. And the cricket ceviche we had, that's what it was. The modified growth of plants, increase certain species, increase soil fertility, make gathering easier, change plant community compositions, prevent large destructive fires, eliminate diseased plants and harmful insects, and increase biodiversity. And that kind of reminds me of the change plant community composition is, we say that juncus, we call that Kosa'aay, has a better color when it grows underneath oak trees or near oak trees, which is Señao, we call that. That's in Kumeyaay, Señao and Kosa'aay. So,
Which dialect of Kumeyaay?
Both.
Both, northern and southern?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the northern would say Señao, and the southern would say Señao.
Okay.
Say something. So it's hard to hear the difference, but there is a difference. Yeah, I learned southern. So. Some things are way different though. So this is Ron Good. He does a small cultural burn, but he's been doing it for many years. Anyway, I'll show it. It's only a.
We're burning to restore the land, restore the resources, restore water. Today we're burning the redbud and sourberry, which is a three-leaf sumac. Both of them are dying and they need new growth, and in order to get that, we burn it.
Cultural burning is a traditional land stewardship tool employed by Indigenous people all over the world, and it has a very strong history and contemporary practice in California. For the students to not only observe him as a land steward and to listen to his knowledge and the way he approached the work, but also to then be involved alongside him and to be guided by him in those methods, really went even beyond what I had planned for the class.
Bringing you folks in class from UC Davis gives us an opportunity to share with you our traditional ecological knowledge and practice. See it firsthand. I keep telling everybody that for centuries, when the Indians burned all the time, then they could come through and do a broadcast burn underneath, burn all these sourberries without burning these trees.
There's no doubt that fire suppression is one of the leading causes for the fires that we're seeing today in California that are so damaging to communities. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that starting in the mid-19th century, but really in the early 1900s, Native people were prevented from burning across their traditional homelands. And now we're just seeing the result of that policy.
We started this morning with a blessing. We started this morning by asking all our relatives out here permission to come out here. I'm not out here to destroy them. I'm out here to restore and make new life.
The thing is that fires are going to burn whether we want them to or not. What we learn from cultural burning practices is that Native American communities have learned to use fire to their advantage. We need to also learn how to use fire to benefit society.
I see a lot of hope in collaborative partnerships where we find state and private funding in which people can work together to prepare the land for a burn. So do that thinning, take out the overgrowth and the underbrush, do that raking and piling and burning before you can implement a burn. I think that's key. I think people need to be educated about what the land looked like for many years.
So that was Ron Good, and me and Ron, we used to sit on the Native American Advisory Council for the state parks, and we had a lot to do with the rangers being able to wear their hair long, and for native rangers, and me and another lady that was on the council was named Vivian Hailstone, and she me and her developed a basket weavers gathering permit for California Indians, so we can gather stuff like juncus, and the plant they're calling sourberry is three-leaf sumac, or I think they call it basket bush now. Yeah, and anyway, it's used to make the white color in basketry. The same juncus we use, but they would use that where they want to put white color. So there's a timing and a frequency that we gather plants. The timing is pretty much set. This is again Don Hankins again data. But the frequency varies a lot, and it probably varies more than it shows on this graph. And it's really dependent on fuel, humidity, winds, and different things like that. My experience with firefighters is that down here we have 18 reservations. Almost every reservation has a fire department. Before there was gaming down here, everybody was a firefighter. The knowledge the little kids had when I used to teach the culture class of firefighting, it was like they knew what these numbers and letters of these different planes and what they were doing, and they're really knowledgeable. And then when I was teaching my ethnobotany class at Sequan, the firefighters were training in the same classroom, and so when I would come to the classroom early, I got to listen to their training.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty Marine Corps, but it was. But I learned a lot of stuff from it. Anyway, so if these two, with I was thinking about, we were talking about I'll finish this. Annually under the oaks, the goal is for a good harvest and control pests and disease. Annually around springs, to bring back the short root, shallow rooted grasses and annuals, to where the goal is to sustain water level and flow. Annually in grasses and shrubs for because you want the following year, you want the long shoots for the basketry like they're doing for the sourberry or the basket bush or whatever, or you can get the long shoots for the arrows. I make arrows out of bush poppies, which for some reason make really super good arrows. Which anyway, to get straight shoots and like that. And every 10 or more years in chaparral. And the goal is to maximize seed and fruit yield and to control pathogens. We actually would only let chaparral grow on slopes. Anytime it was a level area, it was try to keep it open with grasslands or meadows or whatever. Smoke was used as an inversion layer, was an effective insect and destructive pest repellent. Smoke inversion layer also kept water temperature down for aquatic life. especially up north. And most of the people do a lot of fire cultural burns a lot up in Northern California, where the trees are really dense, especially with conifers. The agencies that fight our wildfires are the best they are. These same agencies have also failed with their fire suppression techniques. The greatest failures were Smokey Bear and Leave It Alone. That didn't work. Everything just grew over and get all this fuel, and didn't matter if who lit the fire, it's going to burn really bad. And then the replanting of forests with conifers and not fire resistant oaks. There's two reasons for the conifers, and the main reasons is they can make money off the wood, the conifers, and they grew fast. And oaks grow too slow. We have a mountain range called the Cuyamaca Mountains in San Diego. In the Kumeyaay creation story, there was a battle between the black oaks and the pine trees, and the black oaks won, and they sent some of the pine trees to the west, and they became the Torrey pines, and they sent some of the pine trees to the east, and they became the pinyon pines. And those are the only two pines that Kumeyays eat, and they actually have the same name. They're woo. All the other pines have a different name. So do the oaks. There's no word for oak. Each oak has its own name. So these agencies need to work together with traditional ecological knowledge people like Ron Good, Don Hankins, Margot Robbins, Bill Tripp, Frank Lake, Willie Pink. Willie Pink does a lot of stuff down in Southeast Cupeño. And Australia already uses Aboriginal traditional burning techniques. It's called fire stick on their public lands. I was thinking about one of the things we have to get our tech people is this special clothing that firefighters have to wear, and I was thinking in the old days we didn't wear clothes. We did this on natural. So I guess you'd be extra careful with fire, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I used to think, because we have a fire dance that we stomp out a fire with our feet, and we're barefoot, but it's little by little, but anyway.
It's little by little, but it's a lot of people at the same time, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Not one person, no.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So for burning of coniferous forests, it keeps the forest relatively open, reduces competition, resulting in stands of similar aged trees, removes diseased trees, increases biodiversity, keeps certain species from taking over extensive area. And the most, besides reducing surface,
Sorry, guys, we're having a little technical difficulty. I think Richard might have frozen. So hang on just a second. And I think he's gonna.
Okay. Yeah, I thought I froze. Whew, thank goodness. Okay, so to answer some of the questions that have been going on in the chat, Denise Aguilar, your comment, we've gone a little bit too far with being scared of fire. Well, fire can be destructive, but I think Richard, and in the video mentioned that, it can also be helpful. California has a lot of native plants that rely on either the heat, the smoke, or the ash in order to germinate and come back. One of the most famous fire followers would be fire poppies. I believe the Matilaha poppy. Also, Erin, any other ones that you can think of?
We have actually, interestingly, when we had the Latuna fire, we actually got permission from neighbors to go collect there. So there's a giant Phacelia was collected, as well as a poppy that responded to the fire. And so those are a few that are hyper local. Those are up on our website if you want to check that out. But
And those are under the local source initiative.
Yeah, I'll drop the link right now.
Okay. Are you back, Mr. Bugbee?
Huh?
Richard, you're back.
Yeah, I guess I'm back.
Yeah.
There's an unpleasant one too called Poodle Dog Bush.
Poodle dog.
Yes.
We're not fans of that one, but we're very familiar with it. Yeah, it's supposed to be more toxic than poison oak. Hey, I'm going to remind you about that later on when you talk about pine trees.
Poodle Dog Bush?
Don't put it down, Richard. Don't put it down.
You know what? I'm not allergic to poodle dog bush.
Oh, okay.
I found out the hard way.
Okay.
You see that?
We can see it. Yes.
Oh, okay. So chaparral fire effects opens up areas the same as the other fire. Keeps stands from achieving the mature stage of dense chaparral, when increases the threat of wildfires. Encourages herbaceous fire followers, increases browsing animal populations, and allows better visibility and movement. You can see that those are the same plants as that woody material. Those are the same plants that are coming out of their base there. Also, that wood, if that's been in a fire, that wood has been tempered, and it's a lot harder and can be made into tools a lot better. Also, if that was like willow or elderberry, or there's a lot of different plants. If the bark's burnt like that off the stems or the trunks like that, that's used to make the soft skirts the women wore. They clean them up. They don't look black like that. I actually found a bunch of pounded willow bark, like I call it pounded willow bark, but willow bark like that from when I worked at the Museum of Man. It was in a 55-gallon drum. It was what they packed with artifacts in 1914 and sent them to the museum. And I got them sent out to Kumeyaay women to make skirts out of it. So it's kind of cool. Anyway, so language has a lot to do with our environment and the knowledge we have. Languages are specific local knowledge, have a specific local knowledge built in. The cultures have evolved in a particular environmental context, so they have extraordinary amount of traditional ecological knowledge of local species, plants, animals, medicinal plants, and how to use them, migration patterns of animals. So when languages die off, much of that knowledge goes with them. When children stop learning the language, they also stop acquiring that traditional knowledge. If we can recognize that culture and nature are interlinked, then working on a biocultural diversity as a whole, as a subject, would be a more fruitful way of looking at conservation. Languages are disappearing most quickly in Australia and the Americas, and most quickly in California. Not so much now. There's been a big language resurgence. I work with advocates for Indigenous California language survival. We were actually instrumental in getting the Tongva language and a lot of the Ohlone languages and a lot of the languages that are formerly known as Yokuts brought back, and actually tripled the number of Kumeyaay speakers. There was only like 25, so but there's like 100 now. We set up master apprentice teams, and for people that didn't have languages, there's every 2 years we have a breath of life that we hold up at UC Berkeley.
Wow.
The first Tongva language spoke in 100 years was the hokey pokey.
And now we're up to the 12 Days of Christmas, I think was the last thing that was done.
You know, Pam Monroe's done a wonderful job.
Yes.
Especially taking Harrington stuff, which is sometimes I help her on that because my grandfather spoke California, and a lot of Harrington stuff he translated into California instead of English. So,
I'm glad you said California instead of Spanish, because there is a distinction.
yeah, it's actually more distinction from Mexican too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I remember taking Spanish in school and I got an ace. My grandfather speaks this stuff, and then it was nothing what he spoke. He was like, that was a drag. Anyway, so some of the solutions is follow the wildfire with cyclical mosaic burnings or cultural burns. Treat the different diverse regions of California differently. Northern California has pine forests. We have chaparral. Our forests are kind of shorter, denser but shorter. Anyway, plant more plants and less conifers. Actually, plant more plants and less trees. And if you plant trees, plant oaks.
Can you say that again for the people in the back that didn't hear it?
Yeah.
More plants, and if you
More
plant
plants.
a tree.
Yes, more plants, because you know, if you ever look at an old picture of an area, there wasn't a lot of trees. There were like maybe cluster at a alluvial flume or I remember going in the country and my teacher goes, "See those trees over there?" And I go, "Yeah." She goes, "I was born underneath one." And then I said something stupid. I said, "And it's still there." Meaning the city didn't encroach, but it is. Anyway, so land management agencies with their modern technologies need to work together with our traditional ecological knowledge practitioners and their ancient knowledge. Keep our plants, animals, and land healthy. You know, we're going to get just enough time. Can I show Margot?
Of course, yes.
Okay. This is Margot Robbins. She's been working with fire for a long time. She has her 111 chin tattoos. These are designate her tribal marks, and a lot of women, especially up in Northern California, have these.
This year's Treks is for the first time ever all local people. Because of the COVID, we were unwilling to invite people in from other areas to come help burn and get training. And so we have the Hupa, Yurok, Kuruk tribes, the Cultural Fire Management Council, the Mid-Klamath Watershed Council, and then a couple of independent people that have come to help us burn. This spring is particularly critical for us to get fire on the ground because we are picking the last of our places that have been burned for hazel this spring. So we need to have hazel again next spring for the basket weavers. And so we need to get fire on the ground in the different hazel places. We burned 2 different hazel places. There's some hazel up in this unit, but this one is more of a prairie restoration. It is really gratifying to see all 3 tribes come together and work together to bring fire back to the land. we agreed when we put together the Yurok Hupa Karuk Healthy Country Plan that the tribes can burn together just like we dance together, that this is good for the people and good for our homelands.
This particular Trex burn is very historical in that we have all of these organizations have come together for this training exchange opportunity. It says a lot about the fire community and how we support each other and the collaboration that takes place within that community, and you know how significant it is. It's very significant because either a Trex burn on a prescribed fire or suppression fire or any other activity such as training, fire departments know no political boundaries. They want to come together, they want to work together, they want to participate in these events and support each other. The training exchange is a program that's designed to bring folks like us together from other agencies, departments, and provide training opportunities for fire qualifications in prescribed fire and in operational qualifications. So folks that are here not only get the opportunity to help put fire on the ground, but there's opportunity for them to get very important training that they would not otherwise be able to get. These kinds of opportunities are few and far between. So that's what it does. It helps them get qualified at higher levels organizationally for promotional opportunities and career development.
Is such an amazing thing to see a fire engine for Hupa come down and a fire engine from Karukwe to come down and join the Yurok engine, and tribal people from all three areas come together and work together to do good work, to restore the land. There is hazel up here as well as wild potatoes and wild iris and some different kinds of teas and things like that will, once it's opened up, really thrive and reproduce and be healthy. So we're excited about that too. We're hoping to, in addition to make the acorns healthier as a traditional food, to also reinstate the grains from the prairies and the wild potatoes into people's diets. So we're reclaiming our food security. And then, of course, deer are going to come into all of these places. Traditionally, our people and other tribes as well used fire on a regular basis. Every year, different areas were burned, and there's a cycle of burning. Sometimes you will re-enter a place every 3 to 5 years, sometimes every 8 to 10, depending on, where you're burning, and the prairies more often. And so this land was actually about 50% prairie, and it's only 3% of what it once was. And so there was, prairies would go on for miles and miles with just, some oak trees on it. And it was very open. There was a lot more water in the river and in the creeks. Everything grew in its proper place, and fire helped maintain that balance. So like right now we have fir trees that are growing clear down to practically the river, and that's not really where they're supposed to be. They're supposed to be more up in the higher country. They're a conifer. But when the timber industry came in, and that's their cash crop, and so they not only logged everything that was loggable, but then they paid people to replant trees every place, including the prairies. And so our landscape is very different than it used to be. You used to be able to see through the trees and up to the tree line every place, or down to the river. And now there's so much brush you can't see through it. So, but we're starting to change that as I drive up the road each morning, and the different places that we burned, you can see the skyline, and it's such a wonderful feeling to know, right, what we're doing is making a difference. because of the wildfires, people's attention is really focused on fire right now. And mostly it's fire prevention, wildfire prevention. And so they realize, the government agencies, that the policy of excluding fire from the forest has been a very dire mistake. And the consequences are these huge mega fires that continue to get bigger and bigger and more. And so people are starting to realize that we need to do more prescribed burns, because it acts as wildfire prevention when you purposefully reduce the fuels. So when we are doing cultural burns to propagate certain species, culturally important species, it's also doing fuel reduction. And plus, because of the fact that Native people have been burning for thousands and thousands of years, these different government agencies and other organizations are starting to realize that Native people do know more than a little something about what the land needs and how to use fire. And so a lot of the different organizations and legislators are getting a hold of us and asking, about wanting information about how did we traditionally take care of the land.
Okay, they're just gonna show quick faces.
This year's
So that was Margot Robbins, and how they do it up in Northern California. You can see it's more intensive than down in the Southern Sierras with Ron Good. So these are my 7 Kumeyaay ladies. Oh, they're behind me too. 7 Kumeyaay ladies. This is downtown San Diego in 1892. And this says Maha Shawu Tipa Yumat no quite sure. And I asked my teacher to I was doing an exhibit about healthy foods at UCSD, and I wanted to call it people need plants and plants need people. And so I asked how do you say people need plants and plants need people. She says, my hashuwuti by you might not quite sure. And I go, well, she didn't say anything about plants. She said something about people, but anyway. So what she said was the creator watches over us all and takes care of the land of the people. So I thought that was a lot better title, so I used that. And what is I knew all those words. I knew Maha Shawu, I knew Tipa Yamat, but I wasn't quite sure about not quite sure. So, but I figured it out. It has to do about taking care of something. Anyway, so here's my 7 Kumeyaay ladies. The youngest one is 105. The oldest one is 128. This is how old we used to be when we a long time ago. Before I don't think these guys were actually from local. I think they were from backcountry. I don't think they were quote mission Indians. I think they were living off the traditional foods and not off of modern foods. They were eating acorn mush. They're eating wild meat. And while our meat before isn't like our meat today, one of the things that is lacking in wild meat is there's no fat in it. And that's why we supplement it with acorn mush. We put our food was full of supplements because we never from the time we were weaned from our mother till we were adult, or for since the time you're weaned from your mom, you never drank milk again. There were no cows, and deer were uncooperative. And so, but we knew we needed calcium. And so we would grind up small animal bones and put it in our food. We would scrape out bone marrow from the big deer bones. So we knew what we needed to put in our food. And so it was a bunch of supplements. And because food was thought of as medicine to maintain our body. So the two ladies in the dark shawl on the right-hand side there, one's 126 and one's 128. I bet you can verify it because they were born before there was they were born when there was only Kumeyaay living there. So I'm sure there was no hospital records. Anyway, but they were born before Cabrillo came. And so what that's how healthy we were. And then when I used to work at the Museum of Man as a Indigenous education specialist, and I kept coming across photographs of people, and they say 137, 100, and just outrageous numbers of the age. And well, that's a lot of them. And anyway, people lived to be very old. And so what you had, I thought about our education system and the way we get educated. I got educated more from my grandfather than my dad, even though I got educated from my dad, and my mom, but more from my grandfather. And in the old days, that who would be your teacher would be your grandparents. You have 4 grandparents. And if you're living this old, you have great grandparents. And so you have 8 of those. And if you're living this old, you have great grandparents. I have great grandkids, so I'm not, so you have great grandparents. You have 16 of those. And if you're living to 120 something, 130, you have great grandparents, which I don't know, you have 32 of those. So what it ends up is for every student, there's 40 teachers. And so the amount of information that could be funneled down into a person is just immense. And the amount of information can be very specific to what that person wants to learn and needs to learn to do whatever he wants to do. Because you got to remember, we used to go through puberty ceremonies at puberty, and from before that, we're supposed to be a child, and that's what we're supposed to be. But after that, we have to be an adult, and we know exactly what we want to be. We know we want to be a hunter, or a dancer, a singer, a medicine person, or whatever it is. So the amount of information. So what I'm thinking is that traditional ecological knowledge was passed on that way too. So I remember my grandfather could tell me the time without ever seeing a watch. He just looked at a shadow, and he'd tell me, and he'd be within 15 minutes. So it was like, wow. I don't know how. I always thought, how do you ever figure out daylight savings time? Anyway.
You didn't have to save daylight. You were up with the sun. You were up with the sun and, asleep by the moon, right?
Yeah. So, wow. And so these are my 7 ladies. I know the lady in the black standing up that's 111. Her name is Rosa, but I haven't figured out who else. And they're wearing bay laurel things on their head to keep the bugs away. And so here's my email address, mununjali@aol.com. Mununjali means bear in Luiseño or Payoomkawish. I'm associated with the Kumeyaay. My teacher's called, she said I'm Kumeyaay. I told her I'm Kumeyaay Shui. Kumeyaay Shui means I'm like a Kumeyaay. And the Kumeyays are okay with that. And then I lived with the Mununjali Yogumbeh people of Australia and the Te Ahwina people from New Zealand for a while. And kind of got it adopted into their little things.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
This whole, the Maiha Shewi Tipai, the only word that I recognize is Tipai because that's the people, right? That's people. Okay, from the Kumeyaay.
Yeah.
Question, your presentation focused a lot on the Northern California and those cultural burns. Can we go back to the slide where it had the different times of year that cultural burns can take place?
Sure.
Thank you.
First, I want to go through this Maiha Shu.
Okay.
Maiha means creator.
Oh.
But Maiha actually literally means the water above. Shuwu, woo is to look at something or watch something. Tipai is people. Yumut means the earth. And then, like I said before, I wasn't quite sure what no quite sure was for a long time. Okay.
Yeah, and so everyone, we've been looking at the questions in chat. Feel free to drop more questions in and the Q&A, and we'll get to them ASAP. Yeah, that one. So you have the conifer forest and the chaparral. Chaparral does exist throughout California. So this chart, this timeline would obviously vary depending on the conditions, but how different would the practice of cultural burns be from Northern California to Southern California, Yukon versus Kumeyaay?
To tell you the truth, this chart was made up from someone from Northern California, from Pico. So when he's probably saying chaparral shrub communities, he probably doesn't have a lot of that up there. But I'm sure he's gotten data from it. But you know, California Indian stuff, that's the way it filters down. It comes north to south for some reason. It's the way languages started being revitalized.
Yes.
Yeah, it's from north to south, you know, and I don't know why that is, but you can see that the biggest disparity in time is chaparral scrub communities.
10 to 50 years is a wide span.
You know, I was talking to Bill Tripp the other day, and he was. I said, "Oh yeah, fire burning season's over." He goes, "No, not at night."
Oh.
And I go, "Wow." I go, "That kind of makes sense. So humidity's up, winds are down, and you can sure see where it's burning."
That was one of the questions that someone had in chat. How do you keep the fire from getting out of control?
You know, that's where there's a place in San Diego County called Hukumba. Hawakum. It means where the waters bubble out of the earth. Anyway, they took this like scrub, and it was actually a lot of it was tamarisk and mustard and a bunch of stuff, and they just mowed it down and burnt it up and put a bunch of sand on it and let the water bubble up, and now it's like a blue crystal clear hot springs lake. Not a lake, it's a little pond, but it's all clean. There's you know, some native plants around it, but there's no tamarisk anymore, and and it was kind of weird because the county came out and they said we could burn, and it was kind of strange. I thought it was. I guess I thought there was nothing out there to burn.
Yeah. Surprising that you got county buy-in.
Well, the county had to look at it to do something.
Since you've been doing this type of education and working to revitalize cultural burns in partnership with other agencies, how difficult has it been to convince other agencies that Indigenous people that have been here for thousands of years actually know what they're talking about?
Actually, there's a organization being formed right now with Margot and Don Hankins, and Willie Pink and a few others, and it's going to get the top people that are involved with cultural burns and control burns, not only traditional ecological knowledge people, techie people, but former, maybe even some current native fire chiefs from different reservations that want to go into starting cultural burns. And
are you going to get the Apache 8?
The what?
The Apache 8.
Oh, I don't know.
In case you did, if the people in chat and later on in YouTube don't know, the Apache 8 is a group of obviously Apache firefighters who are all women.
Oh yeah.
The Apache 8.
Yeah. When 30 years ago, almost all the adults that were working on the reservation had something to do with firefighting. They're the firefighters that went in. Then I lived with a couple of smoke jumpers.
Oh wow.
They weren't native, but they're pretty crazy.
Well, I know earlier in your talk, you did say something that, before gaming, everybody worked as a firefighter. And now it seems that, getting jobs like this, number one, they're seasonal, so is there a bigger future, in your opinion, for using traditional knowledge, not just for firefighting, but for forest health in general?
To tell you the truth, that a lot of, they have what they call, there's firefighters and there's fire bosses.
Mm-hmm.
And they're the ones that say where they're going to do the fire, and they're in control. But it's happening is now native people have worked their way up into being fire bosses. Bill Tripp is a fire boss, and he gets control. One thing Bill Tripp is that he doesn't look native, but he's even and he sees things that some people don't see sometimes. Anyway.
Yeah.
Sometimes fires are let go sometimes on purpose. And, it's also been known that they'll make a road so they can go deer hunting the next year too.
Oh, that's management, right? That's looking for the future for the deer. When you were talking about, the way, can you explain what a mosaic burn is? I think we had a question about that.
It means you go around and you look at the different plant communities and you burn that particular plant community. Somewhere in between what Margot was burning and what Ron was burning. If you're burning a plant, you burn in a plant community. Maybe one of the plant community that needs to be burned a lot is the what was Ron was burning what does he call it? He called it sourberry.
Yeah, the sourberry.
That really needs to be burnt or it's real tangled. It actually looks a lot like poison oak.
Yeah, I think we came to the conclusion that the three-leaf sumac is the Rhus trilobata, which is now Rhus aromatica.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
that's what we amongst ourselves.
Which went Lobata aromatica, aromatica. I think it jumped like twice.
Yeah, but colloquially, regionally, basket bush.
Yeah. And it's split 3 ways, and it's anyway, it's a particular, and it needs to be long and straight and not a lot of nodes in it.
And that was used obviously for basket making.
Yeah, that's what you get your white design in basketry. Yeah, so he has like 10 to 50 years for chaparral. I don't, I think I'm going to ask Willie Pink how many years he thinks. Willie Pink is a Cupeño. He's actually a fire follower. He's gathered dogbane, juncus after a fire, and he gets really good stuff. And one of the things he got was he got the bark off of a cottonwood tree after a burn, and then he took the actual cottonwood tree and chopped it down, and he made it was dead from the fire, and he made a canoe exactly like the canoe they found in Lake Elsinore, a dugout canoe. But the cottonwood, the wood was hard because it got tempered from the fire.
What are some of the other immediate after effects to the plants that different cultures would benefit from? Not just having materials for baskets, but food or clothing or anything else.
Well, it's like Margot was saying. She was talking about the potatoes too, that she was they're gonna get when they and I know we're always excited about potatoes. Sometimes our potatoes are onions, the blue dicks, but we also we have a Jimsonia. We call them hapap, which means a water potato. I don't know if you know the plant Jimsonia.
I'm trying to picture it. But
I don't know it. I don't know if it has an English name.
Okay.
That's a Latin name.
Yeah. And in order to prepare for a cultural burn, one of the questions that came in from YouTube was you offer a prayer, but offer a prayer to whom?
Yeah, that it doesn't get out of control. No. No.
That's always wise.
But yeah, I guess you could put that in there. That maybe because you just offer you pray for every time you do something. I don't know.
I mean, to people that are indigenous, a prayer that's the first thing you do. Always, all the time.
Yeah, it's just it's kind of the bring the creator in close and say this is what's going on. And when I say creator, it's you can call him whatever you want. It's
or her.
The same thing. But that's why we call him Maiha, the water above. You look above and that looks like water.
Yeah, the water above. Yeah. And so you offer the prayer, you give your intent, and we saw people clearing the what looked like conifer forest floor. So that is obviously a major part of these cultural burns.
Ron Good calls that cleaning house.
Cleaning house.
Because Ron says, well, it is. Our house was the outdoors, the forest and the woods or whatever the ecosystem we live in. That was our house. We had houses, but those were for cold days or rainy days, or that's to store your stuff in, you slept outside. You usually slept underneath a ramada. When I was young, I used to go to elders people's houses, and they would refuse to live in houses. Sometimes you can get them in a trailer, but they always slept. There was always a carport, and they always slept underneath the carport. And everybody's had mattresses outside, and so it was just sleeping outside. And so that's the way, Ron says that's kind of the way you swept your floor. You burned it, and it makes everything healthy. And yeah, you lived outside. Yeah.
Richard, one of the things you'd mentioned when we were talking before Poppy Hour was that there was a grass that that nearly went extinct.
Yeah, it was called the saddle high grass, and it was the Spanish. I used to work with Florence Shipek, was the main anthropologist for the Kumeyaay, and she told me about the Spanish soldiers talked about a saddle high grass that was from Mission San Diego to Mission San Luis Rey, and they never saw the ground because of this grass. And she said that the seed was like half the size of wheat, and that we ate the wheat and we processed the seeds. We used the stalks for thatching, and then we would burn the stumps, and we're always sloppy when we gather seeds. So the seeds were fire dependent. They needed that fire, and that we light it on fire, and they'd germinate, and the little shoots would come up, and the deer and the rabbits would come out and push out the plants a little bit more. Anyway, and then the rabbit and the deer get real skinny, and you get real fat. Anyway, so we did this cycle of burning this all the time, But then when the Spanish brought their cattle in, they saw it as burning their food for their cattle, thinking the food they're going to eat those stubbles. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or maybe we weren't gathering as much. There probably wasn't a lot of us along that trail. When the Spanish came here and controlled the land and stuff, they didn't control more than 20 miles inland. They claimed the coast, and that was they didn't get too far east. People
they were probably blocked by the chaparral.
Our beat.
Yeah. So another question. So once the forest floor is cleaned out, that part of the house is clean. That's preventing the fire from going up. It's kind of is clearing that ladder effects to prevent the crown fire. Is that right?
Well, it's going to open it up. It's going to not let trees crowd themselves. The canopy is probably not going to touch. It's going to it's just going to open it up so that more herbaceous ground cover type plants will grow instead of trees. And then there would also keep most of the branches, or at least the canopy up higher. And that won't happen on the live oak, because live oaks like to spread out their branches and I call it resting on their elbows. That's why you can always tell if there's cattle around. You look at the live oaks, the live oaks that don't touch the ground. Sometimes there's cattle around, and sometimes the old live oaks, they like to lean over on their elbows.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah. So, and then what happens post fire? how did indigenous cultures, or the indigenous cultures that you're familiar with, handled post-fire? You know, I know that raking the ashes is important. So why?
Well, post-fire, actually, you're gonna have different plants coming, but one of the reasons you did that fire was to shape certain plants to having long, straight shoots or some different characteristics. And post-fire care is mostly gathering, because our native plants, they really like to be interacted with. I remember I had a prickly pear, and it was just started out as one pad, and or stem, or what you want to call it. Anyway, and then it grew a couple of fruits, and I picked the fruits, and it said, "Oh, you like this? Here." And next year it just had so much fruit it fell over. but same with my lemonade berry. But tell you too, plants like to interact with people.
You do. They benefit from
Yeah, they're just, I mean,
the carbon monoxide.
People say they benefit, but the plants benefit too. And that's what that reciprocal relationship is. Chia used to be like 3 or 4 feet tall. You used to walk up with a like a basket and like this tennis racket thing, and the seeds in, and you'd be sloppy about it. You get most of the seeds. We know what chia seeds are, and then but no one's gathering chia anymore. So what's happening is, as chia matures, is the seeds ripen, and the birds are eating the seeds because no one's coming to gather the seeds. And the seeds that the seeds from the lower stalks are ripening too, but the birds are eating the top ones. So the ones from the lower stalks are falling off, and they're annual, so they're going to be next year's crop. But chia is genetically getting shorter and shorter and shorter. Now, when you go get chia, it's like 6 inches, 1 foot. 1 foot. It's like, it's not 3 or 4 feet like it used to be, and that's just a couple hundred years that's change, and that's a big physical change for and it's because we collected the tall seeds, and we were sloppy with the tall seeds. Those were the ones that fell on the ground. Those are what came back next year. And by the time the birds came by, all they had was the short ones to eat.
Yeah. So we have more questions from YouTube. You mentioned pinions earlier as a food source. Were they part of the cultural burning? They seem to do poorly with fire today. So pine, I know that the pine cones need that heat to open up and germinate. So what can you tell us about the pinion pine specifically?
Well, we have two pines that we eat, and both of them called in Kumeyaay are called hu'u. And hu'u, if you remember that word shu'u there to look for. Sometimes I always think maybe that's the pine cone. That's the pine nuts we look for anyway. So, they're actually the pinyon pines and the Torrey pines. They taste the same. Torrey pines are bigger, but their shells are exactly the same. That thin shell. They're both tasty. They're like a big food source for people, mostly on the eastern slope of the mountains that don't have access to acorns. And so their main food source, especially for fats, it'd be pinyon nuts. Pinyon pines, they grow in a more sparse area, so I think that we wouldn't have so much fire needed to keep the landscape clean and stuff. There is fire used to open up closed pine cones. I went to the Los Angeles Natural History Museum with a Paiute elder named Vi Martinez. Anyway, she's one of the first teachers, native teachers to teach in LA. She taught at Manzanar. Anyway, we were in this exhibit and had a Paiute diorama. And she looks over at, and they had a basket that roasted pine nuts. And she goes, I know that basket. She goes, that's my aunt's basket. I roasted pine nuts on that basket. And it was her aunt's basket. It's kind of weird that I know that basket.
Well, it's very personal. It would have taken hours to make it. I'm sure she remembers it. So the next question, also from YouTube, were there differences in how cultural burning was used inland deserts compared to the coast?
Oh yeah, because I don't think there would be a lot. The coast, you're going to have a lot of riparian land that burns, and that's where you're going to get your willow bark and mostly willow, which is going to regenerate, but you're going to open it up, and so it's not real extensive. Now those are water-based bioregions, but now we have a plant in those bioregions called arundo.
Oh yeah.
And it has turned the water-based bioregion into a fire-based bioregion. And so fire is really hard to do now that arundo is present. It was a lot better when we just burnt willow and anyway. And in the desert, to tell you the truth, the only plant I know really burnt is the mui. Mui is the palm tree. Washingtonia florifera.
Yeah, the Washington palm.
And mui means bighorn sheep tree. And anyway, the duff on that would be burnt away every so often.
Okay. I think that does it for the questions. So just a real quick to verify, the picture of your 7 ladies was taken in 1892. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And then someone asked about the link to the videos. Erin did post a link in the chat, not only for our fire series coming up, but different fire following plants, the plants that came in after the Latuna fire, and the PBS program with Ron Good. So thank you, Mr. Bugbee. If no one has any more questions, we're good. We're almost at 7 o'clock. Thank you, everyone. And, you know, Mr. Bugbee, I have to tell you especially, thank you so much for bringing up the subject of language and how language has a lot to do with the knowledge that we have about our ecosystems. Next month, our Poppy Hour is language-based. We're going to be going over this book. I don't know if you can see it. It has, yeah, you can, you cannot, you can, you cannot. It is called Vurva Talk, and it's by the Fernandeño Tataviam Band of Mission Indians. And it's a really cool book that has plant names in the original language of the area. And it is available on the Tataviam website. It is available in person here at Theodore Payne. And if anybody wants to know, we buy directly from the Tataviam offices. So thank you, Scott, for dropping the link in the chat. And later on, hopefully, not August, because I believe we're taking a break, but probably September, we'll have, we hope to have the Tongva Language Committee to talk about plants and plant names and how difficult it is to really reconstruct a language when there are very few native speakers left. So thank you for opening up that opportunity, Mr. Bugbee. Thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us. And thank you again to our anonymous sponsor. Thank you all. There's another question coming in. Oh, thank you, Richard, for the wonderful program. You mentioned Topanga. Visiting them was always beautiful. And what did you say Topanga was? The close to heaven?
Yeah, well, you know, nya at the end means to be there. It means be up high, close to the Creator.
Close to
And
the
it,
Creator.
and it was used for the second word in the Lord's Prayer.
Oh,
heaven,
okay.
when they
Okay.
translated it into.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Remember, we have a free fire program coming up Saturday, Erin?
Yep.
Saturday, and the links are in the chat. I'm sorry, Erin, go ahead.
Oh, no, yeah, 2 programs. One is pruning and maintenance, and the other one is a more general landscaping for wildfire resilience.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well, thank you, everyone. We are at 7. Yay, team.
guys.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this edition of Poppy Hour. Have a good rest of the evening. Good night.